Since I became mayor, as Marlene pointed out, I've been focused on a number of things, public safety included. But it's not just that, responsible fiscal stewardship for the city of Milwaukee, economic development, including housing, including jobs here in our community, climate change, as well as transportation as well. As it relates to public safety, while statistically speaking, we've seen major crime numbers dropping in Milwaukee. And that's something I'm really very proud of. So in the first full year that I was mayor, we saw crime drop in the city overall by about 15%. That's a good thing. And then in the next year, in 2023, we built up on those successes as well, where we saw homicides drop by double digits, more than 20% in the city. We saw property crime drop by over 20%. We saw vehicle theft drop by over 20%, or double digits at least, in the city of Milwaukee. Those are great things, and we even beat some national averages with our efforts around public safety in Milwaukee. So I was very pleased about that, but we're not done yet. So we see those things dropping. We've got to continue to make sure that people who live, who work, and who visit Milwaukee feel safe. And the visiting and the living and the working in Milwaukee are all very important to me. These are different constituencies, but all very important to the lifeblood of our city. Now, I've got the distinct responsibility of representing basically 1 in 10 Wisconsinites who live here in the city of Milwaukee. That's a great responsibility that I take a lot of time and seriousness in my approach to doing. But also, I recognize the fact that what happens here in this city has an outsized effect on what happens, not just in the region, but across the entire state of Wisconsin. And speaking of the state of Wisconsin, right, millions of people come to Wisconsin every year for visiting, for our recreation, for all those things. And about a quarter of all people who visit Wisconsin, they interface with this state by coming here, by coming to Milwaukee. I know that places like the Wisconsin Dells and the North Woods and some other places, they get a lot of traction for visitors, but really Milwaukee is the #1 spot where people who visit Milwaukee or visit the state of Wisconsin come. Like a whole quarter of all people who visit our state, they come here. And of course, we're home to some of the most iconic businesses, the most iconic brands in the state of Wisconsin. They call the city of Milwaukee home. And of course, when you see the freeways every single morning, there's a litany of cars coming in from the Wow counties, Ozaukee, Washington, Ozaukee, and Waukesha counties in to work, to play, to dine each and every single day here in the city. So all those constituencies, I think, are important. We want to make sure that this is a safe city for everybody who's here. So in particular, addressing the epidemic of reckless driving is really important to me. I'm beyond frustrated by the continued vehicle crashes and deaths that we have seen in Milwaukee, but we also continue to work out ways to address the concerns around reckless driving. And some of you have seen those things, right, that we've implemented over the course of time that I've been in office as mayor. The first document that I signed when I became mayor, when I was acting mayor, actually, was a declaration stating that reckless driving was a public safety crisis in Milwaukee. And my goal was to corral all of government to find solutions to address the issue. And so you've seen some of those changes, those physical improvements on the roadway. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that they may not be aesthetically pleasing, but they do the job. They're not there to be pretty, they're there to stop people from passing on the right. And they're doing that. And even in the near West Side neighborhood where I live, I see improvements along North 27th Street there, where there's even somewhat minor, but somewhat congestion that happens there. That means that people are not passing on the right. That means that people have to be in a single file line. That means that people have to follow the traffic law, which is safe not just for them, but then it's safe for all users of the roadway. And that's something that's very important. One of the things that I've talked about wanting to do in Milwaukee in the time that I'm mayor is building out an actual protected bike lane network throughout the city. And I want to do that because it provides an opportunity for those users of the roadway to have a safer way to get around. But it's also, when you have an actual protected bike lane network, that presents another barrier for people who may decide to drive recklessly in our city. So I'm really, really excited about building that out. And of course, we've got our pinned on curb extensions that you see across Milwaukee as well. The parking protected bike lanes where we use the vehicles that are not parked on the curb but parked a little further out from that to protect bicyclists, but then also create a barrier for folks who may want to pass on the right or drive recklessly in our city as well. So a lot of things that we're doing there, and the Department of City Development and the Department of Public Works have really been our champions, really been great supporters in making those things come to fruition here in the city. So, I mean, we've invested, really, when you look at it, tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure changes and supporting decreasing the costs for driver's education. Just recently, we worked in a bipartisan way to get a bill that State Representative Bob Donovan, who I've got this so interesting of a story with, right? When I was initially running for mayor, well, I mean, Bob and I served together on the Common Council from 2016 to 2020, and I remember Bob in the first week that I was elected. And they don't give you a manual, by the way, but you just got to figure it out yourself. But I had a number of mentors that took me under their wing on the city council. Michael Murphy is one who I can't speak highly enough about Michael Murphy. I love that man. Jim Bowl, another long-term alderman. I love that man as well. Just outstanding folks that came in the beginning with me. One of the other alders who came in, I think the very first week, was Bob Donovan. And he sat down, in the office with me and, had conversations with me. And it was a good conversation, right? We were aligned in some areas about improving public safety in Milwaukee. He categorized himself as sort of Mr. Public Safety in Milwaukee. And we had, like I said, a really great talk. And I'll never forget, I don't know if he would want me to tell this story, but I'll tell it anyway. At the end of our really great introductory conversation, which I was impressed with and happy with, he said at the end before he left, he said, "You see, Chevy, I'm not as big of a prick as they make me out to be." And I thought so for a number of years, and then we were opponents for mayor. And so then I revisited that conversation. No, Bob's actually, so the legislation that we worked on in a bipartisan way to increase driver's education here in the state of Wisconsin, not just for students in Milwaukee Public Schools, but really throughout the state, was a piece of legislation that Bob Donovan actually was the lead sponsor on. So we've been able to work in a bipartisan way in order to get things done, not just our shared revenue bill that passed, not just, Marlene mentioned that we went to a Brewers game last year, not just the bipartisan legislation to keep the Milwaukee Brewers in town for the next generation, but also things like this, like improving opportunities for young people in Milwaukee and throughout the state to have access to driver's education, which is very important. So I look forward to continued efforts here in 2024, including dozens of projects that we've started already. I want to mention as well our efforts with Camp Rise, which is another public safety endeavor. I don't know if you all are familiar with this program called Camp Rise. You may have heard about the long-standing summer youth jobs program that we have called Earn and Learn. It's a program that I participated in when I was coming up. It's a program that my cousins and siblings have participated in coming up as well. When I became mayor, and Marlene mentioned this, I was using some life experience because I participated in mentoring programs growing up. I was involved in youth programs that were run by the YMCA of Metropolitan Milwaukee. In fact, I always point out to folks that I wear this green wristband every day still because that's how I got started. It's a YMCA wristband, and I got started with the Y when I was 14 years old. And I'm 37 years old now, so that's more than 20 years. And my involvement in the Y is part of the reason that pushed me to get involved with public service. It was a pre-college program to help young people from low-income neighborhoods in Milwaukee to be the first in their family to go off to college. But the other part of that program was getting young people involved in public service and giving back. And I really fell in love with the service aspect of it, and that's part of the reason why I ended up choosing and a career in public service and government. So I looked back at my experience in programs like that and saw that there was a need. There was an incident where somebody had gone into a classroom, an LPS school, and there's all young black men in this classroom. And the question was asked, how many of you have been involved in reckless driving? How many of you have been in a stolen car or seen somebody stolen car? And every single hand in the room went up. Every single one. And I said that we need to find a better way to engage with young people, particularly young black men, in Milwaukee. And that's exactly what we did. So immediately after seeing that, I called up this nonprofit organization that wanted to be providing mentorship opportunities like I had when I was a kid. I called up Dr. Keith Posley at Milwaukee Public Schools. I called up Shaitania Brown over at Employ Milwaukee. And I called up Governor Tony Evers to see if he could provide some seed money with his American Rescue Plan Act funds, which he did, and I'm grateful for that. And we started this program. That served 200 kids, 200 boys of color in Milwaukee, making sure that they would not be susceptible to stealing cars, the things that they talked about in the classroom. In fact, the Kia boys, you all have heard about them, they were recruiting kids as young as 10 years old, as young as 10, to steal cars. And so this program, the way that we structured it, kids can be as young as 10 to be involved in it. So we're providing another pathway, an alternative pathway for kids who want to do something but don't want to get in trouble. And these kids are getting, access to caring adult mentors. They're volunteering in their neighborhoods. They're learning the value of an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. We're making these investments so that there doesn't need to be course correction with these kids later on in life, and using that lived experience that I had growing up in Milwaukee to make a positive impact on the lives of kids right here in Milwaukee. And that is a part of public safety too. So we're doing a lot of things that way to address the issue of public safety in Milwaukee. Another area that I think is really, really important is fiscal responsibility. I mentioned we worked in a bipartisan way to get legislation passed last year in the state of Wisconsin that boosted shared revenue for communities around the state of Wisconsin, and also provided tools for us to generate additional revenues here. I mean, look, this is, I'm certain, a well-traveled bunch, right? So you go to places across the United States, okay? So if you go to Chicago, if you go to Washington, D.C., if you go to LA, if you go to Miami, if you go to Dallas, if you go to Houston, if you go to Denver, if you go to Miami, I mean, the list goes on and on. If you go to New York, if you go to Atlanta, the likelihood is that you're going to be paying a sales tax. You're going to be paying a sales tax as a visitor to support the infrastructure of that local community, whether it's police or fire or whatnot. Milwaukee was like the only large city in the United States that did not have access to that same sort of tool. So if you got folks coming in on a daily basis, and we do, from our suburban communities, and I want them to be able to come in, but I also want them to be able to chip in, right? I want them to be able to chip in for the services that they're getting. What I told legislators when I was up and down the road to Madison, you may recall when I initially ran for mayor, I said I have a cot in the Capitol. I certainly did during that period here. But what I told them was that, look, when you go to a restaurant and you get service, you leave a tip. And Milwaukee wasn't getting its tip. So I just want our tip, because the thing is this, is that when folks come in, they are protected by the Milwaukee Police Department, right? If they have a medical emergency, it's the Milwaukee Fire Department that's going to respond. When you're driving in, sure enough, you're driving perhaps on a freeway, but you're going to eventually exit off and get onto a city street, and your car is adding wear and tear to those streets, so you're using City of Milwaukee infrastructure, right? So I want for Milwaukee to be able to capitalize on those dollars that are coming into this community, much like every other major city in America has been able to do. So now we're in the position to be able to do that, and as we draw in large-scale events such as the Republican National Convention that'll come later this summer, those folks, those visitors who will also be a part of the quarter of all visitors to Wisconsin who come here, they too will be able to chip in for the services that all of us as taxpayers in the city of Milwaukee pay for on a daily basis. So we've done that. And the other reason why I thought that was very, very important was because for the past several decades, and it is not the past 2 years that I've been mayor, this has been decades in the making where the city of Milwaukee was going to fall off a fiscal cliff, a dire fiscal cliff that would have had devastating effects on our service delivery. So I'm not going to say what that would have been. I'm going to say what is not happening. So when I was introducing my proposed budget for this year, for 2024, because of our actions and our bipartisan actions in Madison, I was able to propose a budget that did not cut Milwaukee Public Libraries. Because we were looking at a situation, if we had fallen off a fiscal cliff, where our libraries all across the city would have been shuttered. I proposed a budget that did not cut police sworn strength for the first time in years. In fact, we're looking to add police. And if we didn't do that, then we would have been looking at, on January 1, cutting virtually half of our police department, which would have had devastating public safety consequences across the city of Milwaukee. I proposed a budget for 2024 that did not cut the Milwaukee Fire Department, which is a turn of events after years. We've been closing fire engine companies across the city, and if we hadn't done that, we'd have been in a situation where we would have had to lay off nearly a quarter of all firefighters in the city of Milwaukee as of January 1. That would have already happened, right? So all these things are important for us to be able to make sure we're delivering services to the people who call the city of Milwaukee home, who visit the city of Milwaukee each and every single day. Economic development. Now, I'm a public safety mayor, certainly, but I'm also a development mayor. Now, I want to make sure that we're building the infrastructure that is attractive for us to be able to retain the talent that we have in Milwaukee, but also to attract new talent to Milwaukee. And it's no secret, I think folks in this room know, that I want to grow the population here. I don't think that we should be spiraling backward. I think we should be pushing forward in terms of our population. We shouldn't be shrinking, we should be growing. Think about this. Like, if you're the mayor, you're sort of like the city father, right? And dads, and as Marlene mentioned, I've got 3 kids. She got to spend some time with at the Brewers game that we went to. A 13-year-old son who, in the last election, was like this tall, and in this election is like this tall. And 5-year-old twin daughters. I should say 5.5 or 5 and 11 months, because they'll be 6 next month, and they would correct me if they were here. Madison and Bella, and I want my kids to grow. And as a city father, I want the city to grow as well. And that means growing in a number of ways. Population is one of those things, but also in terms of economic development. So I want to make sure that there's more housing that's available in Milwaukee, and housing of all types, not just the luxury apartment towers that we see rising in Milwaukee that, for whatever reason, seem to be insatiable. There's an insatiable appetite for that housing in our community. So we've got the tallest mass timber tower in the world, the Ascent, that's come out of the ground, 25 stories. There's a proposal for a 32-story mass timber tower going up in Milwaukee as well. The Couture, which will be a 44-story tower that's coming up right now at Lake Michigan. The 3rd Ward at the north end has a 31-story tower that's rising. There's an RFP for this, so we'll see what happens. But there's another proposal for a 50-plus story mass timber tower, downtown Milwaukee too. But it isn't just that. We are looking for other housing available as well. Just a week ago, I was with Alderwoman Malala Coggs on the north side of the city in the Harambe neighborhood, breaking ground on affordable housing development here in the city. That is housing that we so desperately need. My administration is executing a plan called Homes MKE that is being funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds that we received from President Joe Biden's administration that is allowing us to take city-owned, tax-foreclosed properties that really are a drain on our resources, right? These properties are not generating taxes. These properties, we have to send police to respond to them. If a fire is set in these properties, we have to send fire department there to respond to that. They have to be boarded up. We've got to shovel the snow. We've got to cut the grass. All this sort of stuff. So they're really a drain on our resources. But we're using money from the American Rescue Plan Act And we're investing in those properties, and we're using minority developers. Like the one that I visited a couple weeks ago was a woman, a black woman minority investor who's flipping that house and turning it into an affordable home and selling them at affordable rates to increase affordable housing in our neighborhoods and to add homeowners who are stabilizing forces in our neighborhoods as well. So we're doing all those things, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's luxury housing, including changing our zoning code to add more density in our neighborhoods as well. And the density, I think, is something that's really, really important, because the more people you have in an area, the less likelihood it is that they're going to need to travel farther, because folks will see that there's a density, and so they'll build up more things locally. And if folks are building up more businesses locally, that means people aren't traveling so far. That means that we're not beating up our infrastructure as much with people having to drive. That means people are spending their dollars in their neighborhood. And if people are spending their dollars in their neighborhood, that means that the people who live on either sides of those commercial strips have opportunities for work in their neighborhood. And that's how you build a stronger city, and that's what we're working to do in Milwaukee as well. So there's a lot of work that we're doing there. Another area that I think is really, really important is climate change, and addressing climate change is one of the most important and universal concerns that elected officials should be working to address. Last year, working with the Biden administration, the city of Milwaukee received a $12 million grant, $12 million bucks, to work to make sure we're growing and expanding our tree canopy here in the city to combat the urban heat island effect that we have here. And part of that is working to make sure that people who don't have access to good paying family supporting jobs, folks who live in neighborhoods like I lived in growing up, right? They're the ones first in line getting access to good paying green jobs that way as well. So that's an effort that I am really, really excited about. Finally, transportation. We've got to work on connecting workers and residents via an effective and efficient transportation network. Folks in this room know, and you had the county executive here last month, the county, of course, controls the bus system here, but that doesn't mean that we can't be partners. And we are partners. And so some of the infrastructure changes that the city of Milwaukee is leading also include islands for people who are riding the Milwaukee County Transit System bus, making it safer for them, getting them closer to the bus so they can get on their ride, get to where they need to go. Even the bus rapid transit network that they're building. We've already got the east-west from downtown to Wauwatosa built up, and there's a north-south that's being worked on right now and will be constructed at some point soon. And the county operates the buses, but it's the city of Milwaukee streets that they operate on primarily. And so we have to be a partner, and we are a partner. So whether it's bus rapid transit at the county, whether it's the streetcar system that we operate here in the city of Milwaukee, and I've got more comments about it than just that, whether it's our initiatives to build, again, that infrastructure that folks want to have with a citywide bicycle network here in the city, or whether it's micro-mobility and utilizing scooters, which Milwaukee has some of the highest usage of any city globally of scooters. Look, my security detail doesn't let me ride them here, but when I go to Washington, D.C., and they're not looking, that's almost, I almost exclusively get around by scooter there. And I know that people really value and utilize them here as well. So we want to make sure that all those things are at play, again, so we're building the type of city that people want to be in, that people want to stay in, that people want to come to. So we're doing a lot of things, and I'm proud of the increased number of protected bike lanes, pedestrian areas across Milwaukee, and look forward to more projects coming here in 2024. So overall, I believe that Milwaukee is moving in a very positive direction. There's still so much work to do, and I'm looking forward to addressing those issues head on in the next term, which, by the way, some of you may know this, but I'm up for re-election. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to me today, and look forward to answering a couple questions. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
We have a few questions, and I'm going to do my best to group them to make it a little easier for you to approach.
Okay.
You brought up the RNC. One of the first questions was, how much is the RNC going to cost the city of Milwaukee? And where is possible reimbursement coming from?
How did I know somebody was going to ask a question about the RNC?
Especially here.
Especially here. I don't know. So this is about the RNC. And not just the RNC, but the DNC, because we were in line to host the DNC. I mean, we'd actually won that by beating out some really heavy hitters back in 2020, and we were really, really excited in this community to have the opportunity to do that. I, for one, was disappointed that the DNC didn't just simply decide to come back to Milwaukee in 2024, considering, especially, considering the fact that Milwaukee had to punch way above its weight in order to win the convention in the first place, and then, they're going to go to Chicago. I mean, Chicago is going to be blue, or Illinois rather, in presidential elections is going to be blue until I'm dead. Okay. Wisconsin, on the other hand, is a state that can kind of go back and forth. I mean, these statewide elections are decided, by 20,000 votes. So I thought it was sort of a missed opportunity for the Democrats to not come back and plant a flag here in Milwaukee. But as it relates to the cost, the largest expenditures that we see, the public expenditures that we see as it relates to these conventions, and it was the same for the Democratic National Convention as it is for the Republican National Convention, is in security. And so since 2004, the cities that host these conventions, whether the DNC or the RNC, received a $50 million security grant from the federal government. Now, those grants came online after 9/11 happened. So 2004 was the first time in which cities were allotted these resources. But if you look back at 2004, in 2004 I was a junior in high school, okay? And I can tell you when I lived on 19th and Center, and I would stop at the gas station across the street on 20th and go in with $1 to get like an apple pie or whatever for breakfast, because I didn't wake up early enough to eat breakfast. That dollar today doesn't carry you as far as it once did. I mean, the apple pie right now, I haven't checked. My wife is in fitness, so I can't do that. But that dollar probably can't even buy me that apple pie anymore. Right? So, and without even considering inflation in the last number of years, just costs tend to rise over time. And so that funding has not kept pace with where it needs to be. And so my administration, I know that Mayor Johnson, the other Mayor Johnson, in Chicago, his administration, and our delegations, congressional delegations in Wisconsin, as well as Illinois, have been working to get an increase from the federal government so that security grant is not $50 million. We're trying to get it to be $75 million to cover the security costs that would be required of us to provide for the RNC. So that's what we're working on. And I've been in DC a lot talking about this. I mean, I mentioned it to federal officials when they come here. When I was in Washington within the last month, I happened to be in the same place with Secretary Mayorkas from Department of Homeland Security, and mentioned to him this. He says that he's aware of it. They're working on it. Representative Moore, who has been outstanding on this, she is working to make sure that this happens. I had the opportunity to stop into Senator Baldwin's office and reiterate to her that. Stop to Senator Ron Johnson's office and let that be known to him as well. Senator Johnson was actually here in the city earlier this week speaking with the police, and I wanted to make sure that the police chief reiterated to the senator that it's important for us to get this money, and he did just that. So anytime the federal government is having any interaction with me or my administration, we're working to make sure that they know that that's a critically important thing for us to get the resources. So
let's ask some school questions. There are several questions regarding the Minneapolis Public School referendum. Do you
Milwaukee.
I'm sorry, Milwaukee.
That's probably LPS too, though.
Public school referendum. Would you
Sure.
comment on that?
Yeah, so as it relates to the referendum for Milwaukee Public Schools, let me look. When I look at, and I'm sure next week, okay. Did I tell you guys I was running for re-election? Okay, so next week, Tuesday, is the primary election. And on that election day, maybe you don't see it there, maybe it's in April for the general election, but you'll probably see a referendum on the ballot. And that may very well be in April. That may be, well, the MPS one is in April, certainly, but I'm just saying, generally, what happens is that when these elections come up, especially in the springtime, you'll see a litany of schools in our area that are looking for a referendum to support any number of things in their school districts. And I just read something this week that within the last at least couple of decades, some 80% of school districts across Wisconsin have gone to referendum. Right? So to me, it seems like there's a fundamental problem with funding schools. And there's not just a fundamental problem with funding schools, there's a fundamental problem with funding local governments. I mean, that's why we had to go get the fix last year. And there's not just a fundamental problem with funding schools and funding local governments, there's also a fundamental problem with funding higher education. I was just at the Greater Milwaukee Committee just last week with Chancellor Monet and others, and got to see the state support for institutions of higher learning in Wisconsin dwindling. And they say, well, you wonder why tuition continues to rise is because state support is declining. So there's a fundamental problem in the state of Wisconsin with funding public institutions. And so to me, if school districts across the state, and again, it's over 80% of school districts across the state of Wisconsin in the past couple of decades have used this tool for whatever reasons, then I don't want Milwaukee Public Schools to not be able to use that. I'm a MPS graduate myself. I had access to arts and gym and foreign language and all those things. Like, I want for the kids today and the kids tomorrow to have access to those same things. Kids today, I mean, that's really important to me because, as I said, as Marlene said, I've got 3 kids. A 13-year-old who will be going to high school in Milwaukee Public Schools later this year, and 5-year-old twin daughters who are in K-5 also in Milwaukee Public Schools. Right? All my kids are in MPS and have been from the beginning. And I think that the kids here, much like the kids in any far-flung school district elsewhere in the state of Wisconsin, deserve to have a school district that is well-funded. And if the state is not providing that support, then I don't think we should stop the school districts from being able to ask taxpayers for that support. I wish that weren't the case. I wish that the state would step up and do what it's supposed to do and fund institutions in Wisconsin, whether it's public schools, whether it's higher education, and especially in my case, if it's local governments.
Do you have thoughts about what can be done to boost voter turnout at the upcoming elections?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. I know that our friends from Souls Polls are here, and they're doing a great job of doing outreach. Look, we've got to get folks active and engaged in elections in Milwaukee. I mean, again, I said this already, but elections, particularly statewide elections in Wisconsin, are decided on the margins. It's 20,000 votes. I often quip when asked about this is that those votes, 20,000 votes. We have those in the couch cushions here in Milwaukee. We have them around. Like, folks, we just have to get folks up and active and engaged in voting. Part of that is telling the story. And that's why for me, when I look to November, especially in the presidential election, that it's so important for these stories to be told. It's so important for folks to know what government is doing for them. And I think President Joe Biden's got an outstanding story to tell. And I think it's important for that story to be told. And I think he thinks it's important for that story to be told as well. And that's why, certainly there are surrogates that are out there that are telling that story, but it's not just surrogates, right? It's not just people on TV. I've been extremely impressed, and I hope that citizens in Milwaukee and across Wisconsin are extremely impressed as well, that it's not just those surrogates, but the President of the United States himself is coming here to tell that story time and time again. Whether it's in Milwaukee, whether it's in Superior, whether it's the Vice President coming to crucial Waukesha County to tell that story, whether it's cabinet officials, other cabinet officials who are coming to Milwaukee, coming to Wisconsin. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg was just last year in Green Bay. We hosted Janet Yellen from the Treasury Department here in Milwaukee just before. We're seeing a lot of that attention because there is a positive story to be told. And I just hope that folks are listening to that and that the people telling that story continue to find ways to reach people where they are. Whether it's on the news, whether it's all of us have cell phones in here, you're probably getting a ton of text messages. That way too, they're telling that story, whether it's via social media, sometimes it's via mail at home. The story just needs to be told. And I think that's what helps to engage people.
Several questions about housing, and you referred to some buildings going up in the center of town. These are questions about public housing, and wondering, is any of the high-rise that you were talking about devoted to public housing? And this one specifically asks, what are your specific plans to deal with problems in public housing that Common Ground has identified?
Sure. So the private developments that I refer to, these are developments that are going to be tax-generating properties, usually in the downtown. But that's important too, though. I don't want folks to not understand the importance of having development downtown, because downtown accounts for about 3% or so of the total land mass of the city, but punches well above its weight in terms of tax generation. So 3%, but generates more than 20% of overall taxes in the city of Milwaukee. So that means a strong, thriving downtown that has development, that continues to have development, means that we have the resources to pump out into the neighborhoods. So a strong downtown and tax generation down there means that we can have libraries way on the northwest side. A strong downtown in the tax generation there means that we have fire service on the far south side of town, where you don't necessarily see a ton of development. So that, I think, is important for folks to realize, for folks to recognize. So those developments that I talked about downtown, in terms of the luxury housing, no, they don't do that. But affordable housing, we're working to make sure that comes downtown, and not just downtown, but to neighborhoods across the city as well. So for instance, downtown, there's the Iron District. Folks have probably heard about the Iron District and the professional soccer team that will come online in Milwaukee. Part of that development is having affordable housing, or workforce housing, some folks may call it, on the west end of that development. So if you're driving down there and you see that new building that's coming up, that's affordable housing right downtown. I know that there are other endeavors to bring more affordable housing downtown, and I support those things as well. I mentioned just last week I was with Alderman McCogg's to break ground on an affordable housing development in Harambe. I touched on our endeavors with Homes MKE to work to make sure that we're investing millions of dollars in American Rescue Plan Act funds to take city-owned tax foreclosed properties and turn them into affordable housing and not have them to be drains on our resources. So we're doing a lot as it relates to affordable housing. Not to mention our efforts with the CDA, my Raise and Revive program, where we're taking down dilapidated properties that cannot be saved, and then partnering with other organizations locally to build up on those lots. There's an example right now happening where there's a vacant lot, a vacant city-owned lot that via CDC on the south side is building an affordable house on. So we want to see more things like that happen in Milwaukee. Then of course, whether it's Axe Housing and their programs, or the partnership, the longstanding partnership that we've had with Habitat for Humanity to get access to city-owned lots to build affordable housing options on. So we're doing a lot there. Then the other question about the housing authority of the city of Milwaukee, which is a separate thing. HACM and some of the issues that have been raised from organizations such as Common Ground. Look, when I was approached about some of the desires that Common Ground would like to see, such as $75 million being invested in housing authority properties, I said, yes, I would like to see $75 million invested in housing authority properties. Absolutely. You want to see that? I want to see it too. But show me the money. Show me the money. Because the fact of the matter is that the city of Milwaukee is not the ones that provides the funding for the housing authority. That comes from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so to say to me, or to say to the city of Milwaukee, we demand $75 million, okay, that's fine, but the reality is that money doesn't come from us. And if we did make that investment, then at the cost to what? Does that mean we're not funding libraries? Does that mean we're cutting staff in public works and not having garbage or recycling collected? Are we taking that out of the police department? Are we removing that from the fire department? The list goes on and on and on. So am I interested in seeing that sort of investment? Absolutely. But HUD has got to give money. That's where that funding comes from. And then as it relates to some of the other concerns, look, I've said this before, that when I represented the 2nd Aldermanic District on the northwest side of the city, West Lawn, which is the largest housing authority property in the city of Milwaukee, that was and remains to be the crown jewel of that Aldermanic District. And it's not something that I take for granted, because I know that Willie Hines has lived in housing authority properties growing up. I stayed in housing authority properties growing up. I have an aunt who still stays in Hillside. My grandmother, for more than 15 years, stayed at West Lawn. Like, I was one of the kids running around in that development, so I take this stuff very seriously as well. I just yesterday had an oversight meeting with Willie and with his executive team over at HACM. So we take these things very, very seriously. And in my conversations, not just with Willie, not just with Willie Hines and his executive team, but in my conversations with HUD officials at the regional level, at the state level, even their emissary who's come from Washington, D.C. to talk about some of the challenges that we've had here, each of them say that yes, even though there have been challenges, with Willie's leadership, we are moving in the right direction. Those issues are being addressed. The recommendations are being followed up on. There is improvement that is happening. So that's a story that I think, speaking of stories that need to be told, that's a story that I think also needs to be told.
Speaking of housing, are there plans to invest in the restoration of neighborhoods between North Avenue and Capitol Drive?
North Avenue and Capitol Drive? Yeah, so those streets, and it's interesting that you mentioned those particular streets, because I think that if you drive on Capitol or you drive on North, those can get you from prosperity neighborhoods, prosperity communities, especially in our western suburbs, all the way down to Lake Michigan. Where there are other prosperity neighborhoods as well. Especially North Avenue is one that I look at, because I used to work for the Business Improvement District that had responsibility between 27th Street and Sherman Boulevard on North Avenue Gateway District. And as I was engaging with businesses and with residents there in the past, I saw this, and even as a kid walking up and down North Avenue, I thought to myself, it becomes dangerous, I think, when kids, especially young kids of color, walk up and down the streets and they see some of the conditions that they see there, because they begin to internalize that and they begin to think that that's normal. It's normal for buildings to be boarded up. It's normal for the business owners to not reflect the people who live in the neighborhood. Certainly there should be diversity there, but some of that diversity should reflect the people who actually live there too. It's normal for windows to be busted open, and if you drive North Avenue from Waukesha County into the city of Milwaukee, certainly you've got some prosperity there on the west side of the city. Then you get to the north side of the city along North Avenue there, and you see the challenges there. And then you drive further east, then you get back to prosperity in Lake Michigan and all that again too. And the same thing's true on Capitol. So some of those things that I just mentioned as it relates to our housing investment that we're actually investing in with our American Rescue Plan Act funds, that goes to address those very same things. Our Raise and Revive initiative that I just touched on before. When I get the opportunity to speak to constituents, or when alders talk to constituents about housing, yes, we need to build more affordable housing and more housing generally, but we also have to work to make sure that we're taking down housing that can't be saved, because it becomes a public safety issue in neighborhoods. Because people break into those houses. First of all, they strip out all the valuable materials in there. They start fires in there, they're squatting in there, they're doing drugs in there, they're storing stolen cars there. So a lot of bad things happen there. So it's important for us to take those properties down, because it increases safety in those neighborhoods. And if you increase safety in neighborhoods, the likelihood is that you're going to see more investment in those neighborhoods too. So we're doing that with our Raise and Revive program. I have been encouraging developers also to not just look downtown or in the prosperity neighborhoods that hug Lake Michigan, from the Upper East Side to downtown to Walker's Point to Bayview. You got to look at the balance of the city too, because there's so much opportunity that's out there, and I don't want folks to, for the business community, not to take advantage of that, but we also have to build more opportunities for housing in those neighborhoods too. I think I touched on this as well, and this goes to housing neighborhoods too. Our zoning upgrades. Zoning has not been overhauled in the city of Milwaukee to the degree that we're looking to do it since John Norquist was mayor. Okay, John Norquist. Anybody remember John Norquist? Tom Barrett was taller than me. John Norquist was even taller than Tom Barrett. I didn't know that. But so we haven't updated our zoning since John Norquist was mayor. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing those issues with better zoning, so we have auxiliary dwelling units, so that we have more missing middle homes that unfortunately just don't exist, and that we address that in an affordable way for people who live in the city of Milwaukee. So yes, we're addressing all those things, and I want to see more of those addressed in the future here as well.
Speaking of neighborhoods, you have to drive to them, and there are several questions about the streets, not just the safety, which you've already addressed, but making them usable. And they have specifically referred to Randolph Court near Current Park. I just think there may be a question: is there a plan for when a street is repaired? Is there a general map that somebody in DOT is looking at to say, well, we're going to fix these this week, fix those this week?
Sure. So, yes, there are. And I wish I had my Commissioner of Public Works here to better address this question. The short answer is yes. But of course, when you think about a city like Milwaukee, that has thousands of lane miles that we have to manage and reconstruct, and a limited supply of people who are able to do that, and the sheer costs for going in and doing an actual overhaul of streets. I mean, you just cannot get to every single street every single year, and that's the unfortunate reality. I mean, no community is able to do that, but there is a plan. And look, I try to treat the resources that we have here in the city of Milwaukee, taxpayer dollars, the same way that I treat my own dollars at home. And Dominique's not here, but I mean, she'll tell you that I'm like the penny pincher in the house, and I try to make it stretch, and also try not to excessively borrow if we don't have to do that, because on the back end, then taxpayers have to end up paying that bill. So there's a limited amount of money that we have to be able to borrow to make those sort of investments in our roadway. I think it's also important for us to recognize that many years ago, we had essentially what was disinvestment in the streets, where we just were not making investments in road repair. Now we are doing some things to stretch the life of streets in Milwaukee, such as our high-impact paving program, which is wildly successful and popular. We go in and we take up the first a couple of inches of surface off the street, and within a day or two, weather dependent, we're able to lay a new surface on that street and extend the life of that street. So we do things like that, and certainly there are complete overhauls, reconstructions of streets as well, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes some mix of funding, and including borrowing as well, so we have to be cognizant of all those things. But to answer the overall question, is there a plan? Yes, there's a plan, but you can't get to every street every single year, just because of the sheer number of streets that we have and the need that's out there.
One more question.
Yes, thank you. You've addressed a lot, and I think we'll just pass these on so that you know what the concerns of the group are. The last one I'll ask is, what is your administration doing to ensure the best and brightest are attracted to employment in city government?
Yeah. Well, and that's a great question, and one that I think has caused some additional questions, and I hope not controversy necessarily for us. So one of the first things being first is that if you're trying to attract the best and the brightest, these folks who have opportunity, you got to pay them.
Yep.
You got to pay them. I mean, folks may think, oh, your government, you shouldn't, pay people. They should make, a pittance and still be happy to come to work, and that it's fine to think that. But the fact of the matter is that the people who collect our trash, the people who plow our streets, who replace our water mains, who work in city planning and development, who police our streets, who extinguish fires, and the like, those folks have bills themselves. They got kids. They've got mortgages. They've got car notes, right? They've got talents, and they should be paid for those talents. And guess what? If we don't pay them, you know what they're going to do? They're going to leave. They're going to leave. And I'll tell you this, as somebody who's been sitting in this seat for the past 2 years, I have seen it, even in my own office. Not that they don't want to do the work, or they don't believe in the vision, or they don't want to serve the people of Milwaukee. But at the end of the day, money is money, right? Folks want to get paid. And so it's not that they want to get paid obscenely, but you got to pay them in a fair way. And so you have to raise wages for folks. And quite frankly, the city of Milwaukee, for the past roughly 20 years, unfortunately, we just have not been competitive. We just haven't. And so folks have gone. County executive had him last month. I would joke with him is that folks will start at the city, and then they'll go to the county because they pay better. So I've even had staff in my office directly, or in Department of City Development and other places that I've counted on, who in my tenure have left the city of Milwaukee and gone to Milwaukee County because the pay is better. So you've got to do that. You've got to create a culture where folks want to be, and I think we're doing that. I think there are so many people that believe in the vision that we've set out for Milwaukee, a city that is vibrant, a city that is starting to be proud of itself and beat its chest as an actual city with big city amenities, a city that wants to grow. I think a lot of people are attracted to that. So you've got to set that vision, but you also have to make sure that you pay people. And with some of the increases in pay that we've instituted since I've been in office, we have seen our vacancy rates begin to drop. Those have began to drop, especially, I give this example because I spoke to the Commissioner of Public Works a couple of weeks ago. For the past several years, we've had really high vacancies in our operator driver workers. These are the folks that go out and plow our streets. But because we increased the pay, our vacancy is dropping precipitously there. So that means more people are out there we haven't had a lot of snow this winter, which I'm not mad about. But I mean, those are the same folks that do a number of other things in the city too, but we're able to fill those positions because we're laid out a vision, and we're also making sure they're compensated in a fair and sustainable way. Those are the things that help us to attract talent to the city of Milwaukee. And there's a whole other conversation around having people that want to stay in the city generally. I mean, that's what I talk about when I mean making sure we make smart, people-centered investments in our infrastructure and the like. That I think helps the private sector also to attract as well as retain talent here as well. So a number of things, but setting a culture, setting a vision, and making sure they get compensated for their work.
I just want to say thank you very much to Mayor Johnson for coming. There's an election next Tuesday, called February 20th. It's a primary. We can start by, taking 2 people that we know who didn't vote yet to vote, and you might want to look at who's always on the ballot and somebody who you may recognize and know. So I'll just give that little.